Well, good evening, everyone. Hello, my name is Duncan. I'm the California Director of Americans for Safe Access, and thank you for joining us tonight for our latest live Google Hangout. The title tonight is Legislating Compassion. Happy to be broadcasting live tonight from the Sacramento ASA meeting. I'm here with the folks from Sacramento ASA. You can see some of them behind me, and we're talking about local and state politics, and I'm really happy that so many of you are joining us to join this meeting and to be a part of this live Google Hangout. So thanks again for being a part of it. And I want to let you know that if you're having any issues tonight with this broadcast, you can also join us from YouTube from the link on the broadcast page. If you join from YouTube, you will not be able to use the live interactive features. You will be able to have, there are going to be questions and comments available. I'm going to let you know a little bit later in this broadcast when it's time to start typing in those questions and comments. So thanks again, and let's get started. The topic tonight is legislating compassion. And what we mean by that is that so often in the world of medical cannabis, we're focused on the process of adopting laws, of changing laws, of getting things adopted, and we sometimes forget to think about the implementation phase. Adopting medical cannabis laws is often the beginning of this process, and implementing those laws is an entirely different process that can go on for many, many years. Way back in 1996 here in California, we used to talk about medical cannabis, and the messaging was very simple. If you're sick and you're dying and you need medical cannabis, you should be allowed to have it. And that message is still very valid. But today, 18 years later, that message is also very complicated because now we're talking about land use, we're talking about business licenses, taxation, product safety, commercial standards. And so the issue of medical cannabis is much more complicated. And that's why Americans for Safe Access spends a lot of time trying to get our grassroots base plugged into the process of implementing medical cannabis laws. And that applies at the city, county, state, and even federal level. Because we know from our experience that the best results come when the people who are affected by medical cannabis legislation have a seat at the table when those bills are being adopted. And so it's really important to us that people like you have a role to play in implementing the medical cannabis laws. And it can be much tougher. You know, I remember in the old days before and right after 1996, when we were working on the 215 campaign, the message was very simple: DEA, go away. And that was all we had to say. When we went to a protest or a city council meeting or the board of supervisors, when we went to Sacramento or we were on CNN, it was a simple message: stop busting us, stop putting people in jail. And now it's so much more complex. We're dealing with product safety standards, what kind of solvents can be used to extract cannabis, what sort of standards we need for cultivation of cannabis, all of these things. What sort of things are crimes, what sort of things are not crimes. Where can cities regulate, where can't they? And so legislating compassion is a tricky thing, and we need an entirely different skill set when it comes to legislating compassion. And so the first thing I want to let you know is that Americans for Safe Access has a free resource for you. It's called the Medical Cannabis Advocates Training Center. It is free online. You can also get it in printed form. This is the printed form, our handbook. This is over 400 pages that talks about the history of medical cannabis, the skills you need to be an advocate, and the strategies for strategic planning and for building a campaign and building a coalition. And this applies in your city, your county, or the state for medical cannabis. And so legislating compassion is a part of that because we have to think about medical cannabis and regulating medical cannabis in a much more sophisticated way. And so tonight I'm going to be talking a little bit about what it is that we need to do, but I also want to invite you to come to Sacramento. We're here right now in Sacramento with the Sacramento ASA chapter talking about these issues, but we're all going to have a chance to come here and talk to our lawmakers very soon. On June 14th and 15th, we're going to bring 300 or more medical cannabis patients and advocates here to the state capitol to talk about medical cannabis directly, one-on-one with the people who are going to make the decisions that affect medical cannabis. And so I want to invite you to come to the California Citizen Lobby Day, June 14th and 15th here in Sacramento. You may have already seen flyers like this one at your medical marijuana dispensary or your doctor's office. If so, grab that, and I want you to register in advance. Now, obviously, we want everyone just to show up if you can, but if you register in advance, we're going to make an appointment for you to meet with your California State Assembly member or your California senator to talk about exactly what we're talking about right now, legislating compassion. And it's really, really important this year. In fact, it may be more important right now than ever before, because right now there are more than 20 bills in the state legislature, bills waiting to be adopted by the state legislature, and they touch on almost every single aspect of medical cannabis. We're talking about commercial licensing and regulation, for providing cannabis, for cultivating cannabis, for manufacturing concentrates. They touch on patients' rights, and they touch on issues around vaporizers and sales tax and every other issue that deals with medical cannabis. And if you're not in Sacramento talking to your lawmakers about these issues, guess who is? They're hearing from law enforcement. They're hearing from neighborhood groups that are worried about medical cannabis. They're hearing from religious people. They're hearing from conservatives. They're hearing from everybody except for you. And so you need to be at the table so we get the best possible outcomes as patients and for advocates in the state of California. And so it's so, so important. So go to citizenlobbyday.org, californiacitizenlobbyday.org. Get signed up for this so I can make an appointment for you to sit down one-on-one with your California State Assembly member or senator. And don't worry, we're not going to just toss you out there to do it on your own. The morning of the lobby day, we're going to brief you on the bills. We're going to give you fact sheets, background information on your lawmakers, including, by the way, who are their top donors and their campaigns. And then we're going to all go together to these citizen lobby meetings. And so you're going to be meeting with people from your senator to the state Capitol building to talk about medical cannabis. And so get that done. I need some extra time. You can't wait till the last minute because I need to schedule an appointment for you. So californiacitizenlobbyday.org is where you get signed up to make that appointment, to be part of that citizen advocacy effort that makes all the difference in the world. And we know this works. We know it works because last year, our people, 200 of our people, went to the state capitol and talked to lawmakers about the need to protect medical cannabis patients from discrimination in a very specific way that most people don't even know about. Right now in California, if you use medical cannabis and you need an organ transplant, you can be denied an organ transplant just because you use medical cannabis. And so we want to be sure, we want to know as a result of that policy. And indeed, some of our members have died already. And so our members went last year and they talked to 120 lawmakers about the need to protect patients, and it worked. This year, Assemblymember Mark Levine has introduced that bill, the AB 258, the Medical Cannabis Organ Transplant Act, to protect patients from life-threatening discrimination in the organ transplant process. And that only happened because of grassroots folks who were involved in the citizen lobbying effort last year. This year, you might be the person who can help prevent discrimination, who can help pass a bill that helps patients and providers right here in California. But you have to come and be a part of it to make it happen. And so I see a question just rolled up on the screen. Somebody said, what's the last day to register? That's a great question, and I'll tell you this. The lobby day is June 14th and 15th. That's a Sunday and a Monday. I would love it if you registered before June 8th. Now, we're going to accommodate you no matter what. If you show up on June 15th unannounced, I'm going to get you in to talk to somebody about medical cannabis. But you could really help us out by registering before June the 8th for the California Citizen Lobby Day. So go to californiacitizenlobbyday.org, get signed up. We're asking you for a $25 donation, but nobody will be turned away for lack of funds. Come out and register whether or not you have the $25. We're also doing 2 workshops on Sunday, June the 14th, to help people with local advocacy, because this debate is not just happening in Sacramento. It's happening in cities and counties statewide. And so we're doing workshops on regulations for cultivation of medical cannabis, which is a very tricky topic in California right now, and on using the voter initiative process to pass medical cannabis laws, because a lot of cities and counties have to fall back on that because their lawmakers are not ready to regulate medical cannabis. And so we want to make sure that everyone can go home from the lobby day ready to fight in their city and county. and someone says, I've never lobbied before, will I have enough time to become prepared with what I should expect? And the answer is yes. We have a great sit-in program. We're going to give you printed material to take with you to these meetings that are going to take between 5 and 10 minutes apiece, and you will actually be better prepared than most commercial lobbyists, most paid lobbyists who go in for these meetings. You're going to know the story. You're going to have your story ready to tell, and you will be ready for this meeting. We're also going to give you a place on all of the lobby day materials to write your own comments. And so when you go into these lobby meetings, you won't just be bringing a fact sheet that I've written that's published by ASA, but you'll also have the chance to write your own comments and leave your own comments with your lawmaker, so that the group opinion is expressed and your personal opinion about commercial regulations, cultivation, environmental standards, manufacturing concentrates, you get your own chance to be on the record. A little bit about what I mean when I say legislating compassion. Legislating compassion is our phrase for the implementation of medical cannabis laws. We've passed medical cannabis laws in California, and in many cities and counties. There are 50 cities and counties around the state that have some kind of medical cannabis law. There are about 200 cities and counties that ban medical cannabis or medical cannabis cultivation outright. So we've got a lot of work to do left. And so Americans for Safe Access is trying to train our grassroots base to talk about legislating compassion in a more sophisticated way. That's where this handbook, available for free online, is a tremendous asset for you when it comes to talking about how to regulate medical cannabis. If you go to americansforsafeaccess.org and click on the tab that says advocacy, you can see this workbook for free, along with some instructional videos that go with it. And so I want to encourage you to be to read that and to be prepared for June 14th and 15th. Also to be prepared for the debate in your city and your county about repealing a ban or adopting an ordinance. When we talk about legislating compassion, what we're talking about is what have to be priorities for lawmakers when they're passing laws that affect your health and your safety. And so earlier this year, Americans for Safe Access Executive Director Steph Scher and I toured 6 different cities in California, north to south, to talk to people. And what we distilled were points of unity, what it is we want to see from regulations based on what our base is telling us. And what we found across the state of California is that people are really, really gung-ho to see regulation for medical cannabis, because they understand what our research and our experience show us, and that is that sensible regulations for medical cannabis preserve access for legal patients while reducing crime and complaints in neighborhoods. And so we've been looking at medical cannabis laws in California to see how they impact patients, and it's really important that we bring that land this question, but talking about medical cannabis in terms of tax revenue and in terms of how it's going to create jobs and build businesses and an industry, but very few people are talking about patients' access to cannabis and how laws affect patients. And so when we evaluate medical cannabis laws, that's what we look at, is do these laws help the people who are actually using medical cannabis? You can also find on our website our report on the status of access in the United States and in the state of California. We ranked the states on medical cannabis issues, and what we found is whether or not state laws are working for medical cannabis patients depends on where you live. Not all states are created equal. Some states have very limited rules about who can use medical cannabis. Some have very strict limits on how much medical cannabis you can have. And all of this determines whether or not medical cannabis laws work for you in the 35 states where medical cannabis is legal. And in California, we've got a very unique situation because we already have an existing medical cannabis industry regulation. And so some of the things that we're going to be talking to lawmakers about in California, and that you may be talking to lawmakers about, are whether or not the medical cannabis laws that are adopted are preserving access and are protecting the civil rights of medical cannabis patients, an issue that's often overlooked when it comes to evaluating medical cannabis laws. We have to look at whether these medical cannabis laws will make patients guilty of driving under the influence. There are many proposals that will make it illegal for someone to drive with medical cannabis detectable in their bloodstream, and that's whether or not you're impaired. We have to talk about employment protections. Can you be fired from your job if you use medical cannabis? You may be surprised to learn that right now in California, the answer is yes. You can be a legal medical cannabis patient and still be fired. We talked a little bit already about organ transplants. People's lives are on the line with that issue. There's issues around reciprocity, whether or not people from out of state will enjoy the protections and the benefits of our medical cannabis laws. And so all of these issues are things that we have to deal with that differ from what law enforcement and industry lobbyists may be dealing with medical cannabis. I see someone says, I am not a patient or provider. Can I still lobby and be effective? And absolutely. As a matter of fact, you're most important. Patients and lobbyists and industry people have a role to play in this, but lawmakers are often looking for those people who are not specific rank and file citizens of the district think. And so research shows that the Congressional Management Foundation has done research on what influences lawmakers. And if your lawmaker is undecided about medical cannabis, they are 6 times more likely to be influenced by a visit from a constituent who lives in their district than they are by a paid lobbyist. So never think in the process of lobbying for state legislation and legislating compassion that the individual voice of a constituent doesn't matter. And so if you can't get to Sacramento to be a part of this in person, you can call, you can visit district offices. Every lawmaker has a district office that's probably in your hometown, and you can be 6 times more influential than the big, impressive looking commercial lobbyists who are lobbying the legislature every day. So you really have an important role to play. I want to talk a little bit more about some of the things that we see in state and local legislation that are important. There are issues about access to medicine. That deals with where medical cannabis can be provided, by whom, during what hours, whether or not it's going to be off in an industrial district somewhere or in a commercial district that's served by public transportation. Those are all really important issues. Ease of navigation is a phrase that we use in our literature. How easy is it to get medical cannabis? In California, right now, it's pretty darn easy. You have to find a doctor to give you a recommendation, and you have around the state probably about 1,000 access points, or you can grow your own medical cannabis. So our question in California is, how much of that are we going to preserve? How easy will it be for patients? And this is a very important topic, because sometimes people who are ambivalent, our opponents, will say, oh, it shouldn't be easy to get medical cannabis. But what we have to remember is this: if you're sick, if you're just diagnosed, ease of access is really important. And so we always want to preserve that in the state of California. By way of example, let me suggest that you've just gone to your doctor and you just got your diagnosis. You've got cancer. You just found out. Now, they say to you, you're going to start chemo in 3 days. Can you get your medical cannabis in time for your chemotherapy? And in California, the answer is yes. And that's not the case in many states. In many other states, it could take you weeks or months to get legal access to medical cannabis. And I'm very proud of the fact that in California, patients who need medical cannabis right now can get it. And so we have to preserve that. And so when we're talking to lawmakers, we really want to make sure that there's reasonable, timely access to medical cannabis. It also has to be affordable. And this is going to be a really big deal on our lobby day, because state lawmakers are very keen to tack on fees and taxes to medical cannabis. Yeah. They treat medical cannabis like a vice. And we want to be sure we push back. We want to make sure that cannabis is regulated like medicine and not like alcohol or tobacco. And that's very important, because sin taxes, taxes that are put on alcohol and tobacco, are there to discourage use and mitigate the harm associated with those products. Medical cannabis is medicine, and if it's medicine for real, then it should be treated like medicine. There may be a place for excise taxes and sin taxes on recreational cannabis when that's legal in California. But if it's medicine that you need to treat serious medical conditions, there is no place in medical cannabis for a sin tax. And I want to clear up a misconception people have. I hear this from lawmakers and constituents alike. And they say, well, all these people who are using medical cannabis, they're faking it. They just want to get high and they're faking it. And I want to assure you, as of last year, we know that is not the case. Research published in the journal Drug and Alcohol Abuse shows us that of the people who use cannabis in California, by the way, about 5% of the population of California have tried medical cannabis since it became legal. And of that 5% of our population, more than 1.5 million people, 92% report relief from a serious medical condition. And the top 3 conditions: chronic pain, cancer, and arthritis. These are 3 serious conditions for which conventional medicine has very little relief. And so if medical cannabis were a fraud and the cynics were right and everyone was faking it, you would hear these top 3 conditions. They would be something like skateboard injuries and rider's cramp and sprained ankle, but they're not. These are serious medical conditions for which there is not a conventional treatment. And so I want to encourage you, when you're talking to your lawmakers about legislating compassion, that we keep feeding away at this message that cannabis is medicine for real, and a lot of people are getting real relief from serious conditions. And if we can drive that message home on our lobby day and in our cities and counties, we're going to find much, much better outcomes for patients. And so here's your homework from after tonight's live Google Hangout. I'm going to encourage you to go to our website, the Advocacy tab, and go through our our National Medical Cannabis Advocates Training Center and become an expert in advocacy. If you go through all of the 5 sections of that training system, you can watch the videos, read the workbooks, do the worksheets, you're actually going to be an expert when it comes to legislating compassion, and you're going to know how to build the lawmakers. You're also going to know, by the way, how to read legislation. And this is one of the final points I want to make in the prepared portion of this, is that you need to be able to read legislation and make up your own mind about what laws say and what they mean. I also want to know, before I get into that topic, I want to let you know that if you have a comment or a question you want to share online, now is the time to type that in, so we have time to get to it. And so you can type, if you're using the Google Hangout software, you can type in your question or your comment right now, and I'll read that out loud to the others who are watching. When I talk about how do you read legislation, this is a funny thing, because when I got started in this, I didn't know a thing about how to read legislation. And you can find on our website and on numerous other resources the links to the text of the bills that are proposed in California. And the first time you look at that bill, you're going to look at it on the page and say, what the heck does this thing mean? I can't make heads or tails of it. I think of reading legislation like reading Shakespeare when you're in school. The first time you read Shakespeare, it doesn't make a bit of sense to you. But if you keep at it, it suddenly makes sense. And in fact, you can learn about these bills, is that this is a new language I have to learn. And so a quick primer on reading the bills. When you go to our website or any other and you read about bills about commercial regulations or organ transplants or manufacturing concentrates, is to remember, first of all, they are in fact written to be hard to understand. It's called legalese, and that's just an aspect of how laws are made. So have your computer ready and be ready to Google any technical terms you don't recognize. Also be ready to look up any sections of the law that you don't know about. You'll often see in legislation references to other laws that are on the books, and if you have a computer handy, you can look up those laws so you know what that law is referring. Here's a very quick down and dirty primer on reading legislation, and if you want more, please go to the Advocates Training Center or come to our Citizen Lobby Day, and we're going to help you learn to read legislation. But first of all, remember that legislation is usually amending or adding something to existing law. And so legislation will often start off and be divided into sections based on what it is that it's adding or amending. For our purposes, that's usually the Health and Safety Code, and the Health and Safety Code is what regulates cannabis and medical cannabis in California. And so these laws will usually add something to the Health and Safety Code, and they're divided into sections. So each section usually deals with a different topic in the Health and Safety Code, and it will probably start with the intent, the legislative intent of that section, which basically just means, what is it we're trying to accomplish here? That's important if there's ever a dispute in court about what the law means. If they can't figure it out and they have to go to court, the legislative intent is very important. After the legislative intent, there'll usually be definitions. The definition sections will tell you what it is the terms used in that ordinance mean as they're used in the ordinance. And then they'll start with the sections that we call the active language or the functional language, which tells you what the law does. And don't expect it to be crystal clear. When you start to read the functional language, read it slowly, read it over and over. For me, it helps actually to read it out loud. That helps me make sense of it. And if you're having trouble with it, take a piece of paper with you, and every time you see an action phrase, write it down on that piece of paper. So if it says, people shall not be subject to penalties, write down shall not be subject to penalties if, and what that is. If they say you shall obtain a permit, write down shall obtain a permit. And when you finish writing down all the action words in the section you're reading, you'll have a pretty good bullet point outline of what that section does. So look for those action words, and you're going to have a really good idea what legislation says. I also want to remind you that in California, every bill that's proposed for the state legislature has a summary, that Legislative Council's digest that is at the front of that bill. And if you read that, it should say in relatively plain English what the existing law says and how the law will change when it's adopted. So if you read the summary, the intent, the definitions, and the action phrases in state legislation, you're going to know more about that law than most lobbyists, absolutely most citizens, and I'm sad to say you'll probably know more about it than most lawmakers who have very little time to read the bills that they're called on to vote on. And so you may actually be a really important resource for your lawmaker or for their staff when it comes to state legislation. So I see some take, it says, question, will there be a training on how to read legislation at the lobby day? And yes, what I just gave you in brief, we'll be going over more. We're also going to be talking most specifically about how to talk to your lawmakers about legislation, because you have so little time and we want you to be effective. And so we're going to talk to you about the bills and what they say. We're going to provide you with fact sheets about the bills that include our interpretation, plus a place for you to put your comments and your opinions. And then we're going to go through a role play with you about how to talk to lawmakers about these bills. So I think when you leave our lobby day, the morning of June 15th, when you leave the group meeting, you're going to be really, really well prepared to deal with state legislation, talk to lawmakers and talk to staff. And I think you're going to feel confident and you're going to feel 10 feet tall when you go in and do this. So I really want to encourage you to be a part of it. And again, if you can't get to Sacramento, we will have digital ways on the telephone or on the computer for you to participate as well on that day. So I have been talking now for about 25 minutes. Thank you for listening to that. I want to acknowledge and thank my friends from Sacramento Americans for Safe behind me here to talk with us all around the nation and around California about Legislating Compassion. And so I want to make a time here for questions and comments as well from the group sitting here. And I want to remind those of you who are in the group, you have to speak really loud because there's no professional recording equipment here. And so speak up if you have a question or comment. I'll make a space for that now. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add to the live Google Hangout tonight? I hear crickets chirping. All these guys are completely up to date on it. That's awesome. So thank you again to the Sacramento ASA chapter. And as we wrap this up, if anything comes up, please feel free to speak up. So exciting to be here. It's great to see. This is one of our resurgent chapters here in the state of California. They're really getting involved in this. Now, I see more questions rolling in, and be patient because I've got a window this big to read your question. Let's see. Question. I am not a patient or provider. Can I still be effective? Yes, we did that one already. Will there be a training? Yes. Okay, I think we got them. Excellent. That window is full. We've got everyone. So if you're online and you have questions, we're wrapping up. We're coming to the close of this broadcast. If there's anything else, jump in there right away. I want to just very quickly mention to you that this process of citizen lobbying, whether it be in person in our lobby day in your cities and counties, or whether or not you're breaking new territory for safe access, this process is a learning curve. And like I said, in the old days, did not want. We don't want people to go to jail. We don't want patients busted. We don't want the DEA in California. And we've turned a corner now. And so I want to encourage folks, when you're dealing with politics, to remember that the key is to bring solutions. It's one thing to say what you don't want. And that's an important thing, is to recognize I don't want what I'm seeing right now. But when it comes to citizen advocacy and to legislating compassion, it's really important to say what you do want. And I want to say a word here for pragmatism and incremental change. Because so often we say, oh, well, what I want marijuana to be legal, and I want all the prisoners to come home from jail, and I want there to be no tax on cannabis, and all of those are wonderful goals. But in terms of politics, when you're talking to your lawmakers, sometimes you have to figure out what it is that you can get and what will function. We, for instance, do not want to see any local bans on medical cannabis providing or cultivation. But right now in California, we see a lot of that. And so it's important when you're doing your advocacy work at the local, state, or federal level that you sometimes recognize where you can't go and get what you can get. And that pragmatism is actually the history of all of our progress on medical cannabis, dating all the way back, even if we go to the most recent, in 1970, the Controlled Substances Act, making marijuana illegal on the federal level for the first time. that pragmatism has really been they've been our stepping stones all through the process of medical cannabis on into non-medical cannabis legalization. And so when you're legislating compassion and you're talking about things like access, taxes, restrictions on who can and can't get cannabis, zoning rules and land use, remember that it's not always the end of the conversation. Sometimes it's just the beginning. So if you can't get everything you want in your city or county, or you can't get everything you want in state legislation, it's okay. It's okay, because we're going to get another bite at that apple, because this process of politics and regulation goes on and on. And so sometimes you may have to settle for something that is not perfect in order to move forward. And that is actually a common thread in all social change movements, whether that be reproductive rights, marriage equality, civil rights, all of these things. They all move forward in incremental steps. And so I want to encourage our people to be strategic and pragmatic with cannabis, because this year in Sacramento, we're going to lose some battles. We're going to win some battles, perhaps this year, but that's okay, because we're on the way. And as long as we're making steps in that direction, we're accomplishing our goal, and you're being effective as a citizen advocate. So let me tell you again, go to californiacitizenlobbyday.org, get registered for the Lobby Day, and even if you can't make it, I want to encourage you to get on our mailing list and to be a part of that process. So we're going to wrap up now. I want to give one final call to people online. If you have any questions or comments, type those in right now, because we're about to wrap up. If you're here in California, I want to encourage you to get on our California mailing list, so you get my California Weekly Roundup. It comes out every Monday morning. It goes out to about 13,000 plus active members of Americans for Safe Access. It talks to you about news and events around the state. And I also want to encourage you right now to join Americans for Safe Access if you haven't already. Our spring membership drive is underway. And right now you can join ASA, the basic membership levels. And for that, you're going to help support the cause of medical cannabis reform at the city, county, and national level. So thank you for doing that. It's the membership drive, so it's a great time to do it. I see one more comment popped up. It says, thank you for all you do, and you're welcome. And thank you for being a part of it. I also wanted to say thank you to Sacramento patient sitting here while I look the other way and talk to my computer. Thank you so much. And seeing no other comments, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up tonight. Thank you for being a part of this. And I really, really want to see you on June 14th and 15th to do the nuts and bolts work of legislating compassion here in California. Thanks so much, and have a great night.